All right, let's set the table for Alabama here. Season preview. It's sort of a different vibe around Tuscaloosa. There's no portal churn, especially after the spring. They didn't really have guys hit the exit door. Quite the opposite. They had a lot of guys who could have hit the exit door, probably for more money elsewhere. Probably some of these guys could have been second rounders, third rounders in the NFL draft. Kind of an Ohio State vibe in that they had a lot of guys, a nucleus come back last year. That team goes on to win a title. This Alabama team will go on to do ... That's kind of what we're here for. They got the sixth best odds to win it all. They got the third best odds to win the SEC. You know you got Ty Simpson as your, in all likelihood, your starter, and it's viewed sort of as a transition, maybe as a bridge player to Keelan Russell for normal fans. But see, people who follow recruiting hardcore remember Ty Simpson. Well, that's a former five-star guy in his own right. And yes, he was. And yes, he could do some special things this year. So with that in mind, a lot more settled nature of Alabama football year two under Kalen DeBoer. Biggest questions I have, first and foremost by a mile, I'm going to put the prayer hands together, offensive consistency. That bit them to me more last year than any other thing. Because there were times Jalen Milroe looked like a superstar. There were times Jalen Milroe looked completely inept, and the offense worked downstream of that. Even within games, sometimes that was the case. And so I was listening to Kalen DeBoer talk the other day, and he alluded to just what the mere presence of consistency does. It does it to your run game. It does it to your play-action game. It does it to how defenses have to defend you. I don't care if Ty Simpson isn't as good as the best of Jalen Milroe. And I don't care if at times they go 3 and out, and it's just, is it consistent week in and week out? Do you know what you're getting? Because if you're Kalen DeBoer, if you're Ryan Grubb, if you know what you're getting, you can game plan around that. You can coach around that. You cannot coach around going in and thinking we may get the LSU version of our offense. We may get the Oklahoma version of our offense. There's no scheme in the world that's built to coach around that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and it doesn't have to be difference-making, but do they have a good enough pass rush? Do they have guys either individually or in the aggregate that can affect the quarterback, that can affect the quarterback and affect the offensive rhythm and timing and flow in games enough? Or is it one of those situations where you're kind of watching Alabama and you're saying they got some good players up front defensively? Some of these guys are even former five-stars, but none of them are really popping. I think of Yanze Pierre of recruiting classes gone by. I think of Keon Keeley of recruiting classes gone by. Now, those are two guys who have yet to really shine at Alabama. Then you got like your LT Overtons of the world, Tim Keenan. Those guys have shined. They're back. Those are two guys that they kept that probably could have gone elsewhere. They were 69th in sacks per game last year. And that's down off of the latter Saban years when they were consistently top 20, sometimes top 15 in that category. They only had two guys with 3+ sacks last year that are coming back. And so it doesn't always mean the entire world. It just means you have to have guys in college football that used to be really highly rated out of high school that thus far haven't fulfilled on that potential, that fulfill on that potential. It's a developmental game. It's part of the fun. It's part of the great thing about watching this level of the sport is there will be guys who are mainstays on a team like Alabama in November that if you go back and watch your season preview or you read your preview magazine, weren't featured a whole heck of a lot in July or August. Hey, maybe we're talking about some of those guys. Thirdly, we talked about Kalen DeBoer year two. We talked about Ryan Grubb coming in on this roster and on his coaching staff. He was for a little while on it last year before he went to Seattle. But my question very broadly is, what does the year two bump tangibly mean? We always talk about the year two bump around here. A coaching staff, first year, it's chaos. Then the hurricane settles down a little bit, hopefully. And you settle into your groove and your way of doing things, hopefully. Yeah, but that's like 50,000-foot stuff. That's really, really in the clouds. When you drill down ground level, what does it mean for them? Well, I'm looking at two stats in my hand right now. Alabama was 97th in the country in turnovers committed last year. They were 123rd in the country in penalty yards per game last year. My guess, aside from the pass rush, aside from quarterback, aside from consistency, is that stuff right there. If there's a year one to year two bump, that stuff right there drastically improves, and therefore Alabama's fortunes in the way of consistency, but also in close games, improve. Hey, quick timeout. check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, make sure you do. It's free. It doesn't obligate you or sign you up for anything. It just helps us keep the channel free. All right, back to the show. The best position group on this team is the DB room. And it is a minor to a moderate, maybe even a major miracle, what they've done over the span of 2 years, because they were gutted fairly thoroughly in that room once Nick Saban was out the door. And then you see guys like Caleb Downs leave, and you fast forward, less than 2 years. And this is not only a strength of the team, it's the strength of this team. Keon Sabb and Bray Hubbard are their safeties. Xavier Mincy's one of the guys that people around there are most excited about, and you're just looking and saying, but he's listed behind those guys. Yeah, but that's competition in practice every day. Dom Jackson and Xavier Brown, the ones on either side of the field at corner, they got guys behind them that I think would start at a lot of places in the SEC. So it's really funny when you look at Alabama and there's just a random kid like Red Morgan, who played some for him last year, and he'll be in the rotational 2 deep this year, but Red Morgan is clearly starting for a lot of teams, and he's just in the mix at Alabama. That is high-level competitive depth, the likes of which you don't really see in college football much anymore, because everybody's twos are someone else's ones, and the portal is so tempting, and they were able to avoid that here. I think also linebacker is a pleasant surprise for them. That's viewed kind of as a strength this year, and if you ask them a year ago, they would have said, ooh, boy, linebacker now, that may be a little touch and go a year from now. Well, as it turns out, partly due to injury, guys like Lawson coming back, and partly just due to development, maybe not so much. Their breakout player for me this year is Isaiah Horton. That's the transfer from Miami. Had 616 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. He's just a different body type. When you look at Ryan Williams, that's a superstar. But Isaiah Horton is built way different than him. He's built way different than Jeremy Bernard. I mean, Horton's legit 6'4", 210 kind of guy. Gives him a real big-bodied physical presence on the edge. And I would also say, though, if it's not Horton and there's a breakout guy in that receiver room, Latsier Brooks, I believe number 17, that's a guy I would circle. I saw them practice in the spring, and I don't want to oversell guys before they've ever played a down of football, and he hasn't yet. The tools are there. When you see him, you say, I remember what Jalen Waddle looked like when he played here. That kid reminds me of that. He hasn't done anything, but he reminds me of that. All right, the schedule for Alabama. We got him with the 9th toughest strength of schedule in the country. I don't know what to make of this game at Florida State week 1. That could be a 30-10 win. That could be a dogfight late in the fourth quarter because no one, including fans in Tallahassee, knows what Florida State's going to be. I got Wisconsin on the schedule as well. So most years, that is a really, really beefed up out-of-conference slate. And it may be this year. It just happens that Florida State and Wisconsin were both down last year. There's no back-to-back road game on this schedule. There is really no bye advantage. They got to bye before Georgia. Georgia's got to bye before them. They got to bye before LSU. LSU's got to bye before them. I think the game at Missouri is, if there's going to be a trap on here, the biggest trap. They play Missouri after a trip to Georgia and then home against Vanderbilt. Then they go to Missouri, and meanwhile, Missouri's off. They are rested and ready to go. They got 7 games versus teams that we would classify as Tier 1 or Tier 2. Also, we get to see Kalen DeBoer's first trip to Auburn. It's always fun. All right, what do we think here? Let's pull up the model. The best case, the worst case, and the most likely per the model for Alabama. We got their best case being 11-1, and that's not really a shock. Yesterday's 12-0 is today's 11-1. Some of these top-end teams, even at their best, the model is going to say most likely your best path is 11-1. It's an SEC schedule. I mean, there's too much difficulty collectively there for you to navigate that thing. However, the worst case is 6-6, and we don't count injury. Like everyone could say, oh, if our quarterback goes down. No. I mean, with your quarterback, and it just doesn't pan out. He's an inconsistent, average player. Your run game doesn't round into form, which we haven't talked a lot about, but it's only because I've beaten that drum all spring and most of the summer. Like, can Alabama run the ball? Well, what if you can't? What if that secondary is still prone to giving up big plays? well, then 6-6 is there. And that would be a disaster. And you can imagine the headlines. The most likely record for Alabama, according to the model, is 9-3. That's where the model sees Alabama. That's not my prediction. I'll make my prediction a little bit later in August. But that's how we see it for Kalen DeBoer and the Tide heading into year 2.